you a rapid talk. I actually used the same deck at Ubisoft earlier this week. It took me 3 hours to get through, right? So I only have like 30-something minutes. So I'm going to do this fast. It starts with the fact that it's mostly. So we're not an effective team. So everything I tell is from my own experience, right? We're usually effective, but not always. So we have this quarterly big sale, and it actually was earlier this week. So it started on Tuesday at midnight in Amsterdam, and then this happened. And that's when we have 10 times more traffic, so my team is online. But I just flew into Montreal, so I was in a bar in the airport, switched on my laptop, started debugging with my team, right? So that's why it's mostly effective, but not always. So why the effective? Well, you know the book, right? The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You've seen that book, right? Nobody's read it, but we all browsed through it, or we got the summary from chat, whatever, right? So yeah, but the problem is, this is about individuals, right? That is as you as an individual. However, software development, I think, is a team sport. And there's no way that we can still do it alone. Yes, alone with some help from chat or Gemini or whatever, right? But I think mostly we do it with other people. And then there's some problems in software development. And I'm going to give you some of the examples of the problems that we've seen over the years. So some decade ago, I was the CTO for an insurance company. This is their building. So I come from the Netherlands, and half of the Netherlands is below sea level. So they have this thing called a mainframe, and their mainframe was on the 4th floor. In most countries, it's in the basement, right? We have it on the 4th floor. It's an insurance company. Now, this particular mainframe, they were unable to update the operating system. So it had an operating system of around 20 years old, which is kind of old if you never update it, so it'll get you into trouble. And it got worse because they were actually running code on this thing. They had 18 million lines of COBOL, by the way, this is COBOL, and 12 million lines of Java running on the thing, right? That's an achievement as such, right? That got worse because this is actually an example from their code. This is, by the way, the only code I have in this deck. And it's not only COBOL, it's also in Dutch. Which means you cannot put it to India and say, go off and read this stuff and make sure that you transfer it to Java or whatever you do. But it got worse because what happened is the people who wrote this code, they wanted to retire, right? They were aging, and at some point they were going to retire. So they needed to get rid of these systems. And what they tried to do is start a really big project guided by the CEO of the company, who was, well, I'm not going to talk about him anymore today, and he just started these really big projects, did the data model himself, and they tried 6 times, each time lasting 2 years. So it took them 12 years to get to the point that they realized that Gall's law is valid, right? So a complex system designed from scratch never works, right? Remember that. If you're doing this, stop doing this. It doesn't work. Instead, you need to start over with a working simple system. That's the only way to get out of this mess. I'll show you another problem. These are the CEO on the right and the CMO of the company I currently work for. And they said, can we be in your slide deck? I'm like, yeah, okay, sure, I'll take your picture. It doesn't mean much, but it's an e-commerce company. And they have this thing that I call the platform problem. They started off with a single deal on a website backed by Excel. I'm not kidding you. This is 20 years ago. We exist 20 years now. And then it started growing, right? They built a website, and they built another website. They built a mobile app. And then they started realizing that they needed all sorts of backing systems, like a CMS and a CRM, and a data warehouse. And then, well, they put an ESB in there, and everything in the kitchen sink that you could think of. And then they were like, you know what? We're going to do microservices as well. So this was 2016, 2017. So they created all sorts of microservices. They had weird names, like the one that's called TikTok. I have no idea what it's doing. I have no idea what it's called like this. It was before I entered, right? And this thing called baggage was probably the shopping cart, but I'm not sure, actually. And then it needed to, well, be in the cloud, right? So they put it on GCP, and they put the backups in Azure, and they had a CDN and everything, and it got more complicated and more complicated. And then they needed to interact with all sorts of external parties, like marketing systems, payment systems, all sorts of stuff. And then what happened is, over time, they realized that they had data everywhere, right? So it got worse because they had programmers for the CMS system, which was written in PHP. So they had a PHP programmer, and they were like, where do we leave the user accounts? You know what? We know somebody who can do that in the CMS. We'll put it in the CMS. So they had 2.3 million user accounts in their CMS. That is not a good idea, I can tell you, right? So, and then they sort of got stuck because they needed to keep the data in sync. Well, that's where they got stuck. Now, and then they happened to end up in what I call technical death. That means all the people in tech are just working their asses off to keep everything alive. And then you have no room whatsoever to innovate anymore, right? Have you been in a situation like this? I have. Well, yeah, everybody has, right? So this is the problem. And that's a big problem. Now, actually, we always get the blame, right? Tech people. I write code. I always get the blame for everything, well, especially my team. But it's like, well, what's the real problem, right? Is it dependencies? Yeah, of course. Dependencies suck, right? We know that. Or is it monoliths? Well, not necessarily. As long as they're modular, you're fine, right? Or is it just in the general sense, the legacy? By the way, the legacy is that stuff behind me, not me. It's like, this is in a Monar Jordan. But the thing is, we always get the blame, but the origin is always somewhere else because it's always in the organization. It's the people that chase us that say, yeah, we need this and we need this now. And then who's more important, right? So everybody comes up to my team and they say, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And that is where the problem lies, right? It's in the project managers, the product managers, the managers, the CEOs, the Scrum masters, the product owners. Oh, if I say the word product owner, I'm just, no, sorry, that's the word Scrum master that does that. So, and then there's one more thing, and that is, there's always change, right? I've been in this industry for a very long time, over 40 years, and I've never seen anything else than change. There's always change, and we need to be prepared for that, right? We need to be able to tackle that or be upfront of it. And then you might say, now what? So this is a good point to introduce myself. I only have one hat, one T-shirt, so that's me. I'm Sander. I'm a dad of three grown-ups, sort of. I speak a bit, I write a bit, and I'm a CTO. I travel a lot, and I write code every day, right? I wrote a lot of code today, or actually I took a lot of code out actually today, which is good. So I'm the CTO for this e-commerce company I just told you about, and this is my social stuff. To prove to you that I actually write code, I started writing code, by the way, in 1978. Anybody older than this? Sorry, I wrote code for a very long time. To prove to you that I'm actually a programmer, this is me. I am double object-oriented. Can't help it, nothing to do about it, although I prefer functional code. It gets worse, by the way. I live in Amsterdam, in the Java street. This is actually the view from my window. It's really true, this story. And I do a little bit of open source, but that's beside the point. So the stuff I'm going to tell you now is the stuff that comes out of my stories, my work, my team, the companies I work for. So this is all real. And it does mean that the stuff that I'm telling you might be worth something in your context as well, but it's not necessarily the case, right? So take from it what you like and leave the rest out. There's going to be some shocking slides in this thing, and should I prepare you already for that? So 7 habits of a mostly effective team. I took this picture yesterday, I liked it, and so it's good. So anyway, here's the 7 habits. So we prioritize very pragmatically. I'm going to show you what we do that. We try to kill complexity because, well, complexity kills us basically, right? We try to own the work. And I'll try to tell you how we do that. And we try to always learn. So this is a short talk, right? So I'm not going to go into many details, but at least I'm going to show you what we do. And then we use this thing called microteams. It's a pattern that we sort of coincidentally discovered, and it actually works quite well for us. Of course, we deliver continuously. My team delivers about 50 to 80 times per day to production. And we have fun. And that's about drinking beers as well, which I hope we're going to do later on today. But it's always also about some other stuff. So let's go through all 7 of these. So first of all, prioritizing. The problem with prioritizing, if I had all these people in the company come up to me and come to my team and say, can you do this, can you do this, can you do this? The problem we have is we have too few people to actually answer all the questions. So you have to prioritize. And then the question is, so where does the work really come from? Who decides what we work on? And most of you will say, yeah, that's the manager, right? But we don't have a thing, well, I'm the manager sort of, but I don't manage stuff. I don't like to manage that. And it actually starts with this thing called purpose. If you have a direction to go to, deciding what you work on becomes a lot easier. And when I joined this company, they didn't have much of a purpose, much of a strategy, actually. And the thing is, as Nietzsche says, he who has a why, who has a why to live for can bear almost anyhow. So we try to figure out what was our dot on the horizon. And the first answer I got from the CEO was, yeah, we want to make more revenue with higher margins. Good idea. And then I said, so how do you plan to get there? And he's like, no, he didn't. He had all sorts of ideas. So we came to this sort of like mission statement. It took us a while to get at, and we talked to everybody, and then we're like, yeah. We want to be Europe's leading deal site. We're not. There is no leading Europe's deal site, right? It doesn't exist. But it does mean that I need to prepare the platform for being able to do that in a multi-language, multi-currency, multi-everything, basically, multi-tenant, multi-shop, all that stuff that you want to do, right? And then it's connecting our community of consumers. And there's actually a community. We have people who moderate the comments on the website, and they're volunteers. And when I got to this company, I was like, what do you mean volunteers? Well, there's just people doing this. So what do they get out of it? Well, they get a T-shirt. And they go to dinner with the CEO once a year. That's what they get from it. It's a pretty cool thing, actually. So, and then they said, we want to have surprising and attractive A-branded products. Now, when I got there, the website was so hideously ugly, and they said, that's on purpose, because it's a deal site, that A-branded deals didn't even want to be on our website. So like all the big brands, we couldn't sell them because the website was just too ugly. So we had to tackle that. And all this stuff basically gives direction on where we go to. And then the most important statement is this, right? It is, you can only spend your time once. That means we, as tech people, we can only do one thing at the same time. Well, unless we deploy 16 agents that do the work for us, but other than that, we just need to focus on one thing. And to get out of this mess, out of this dead situation, we actually needed to say, you know what we're going to do? We're going to spend 70% of our time on innovating, and 20% on adding new features to existing stuff, and 10%, just to keep the lights on. So what we did is that we put a group of people together, and we call it the tech board. And the tech board is a group of the stakeholders in the company that together decide on the bigger things that we can spend our time on. So, and they answer these questions. They say, well, okay, anything that comes in, and anybody can pitch anything they like, right? And anything that comes in, we say, okay, they pitch it, and then we say, does it help to reach our strategic goals? That's the sentence we had before. If it doesn't, throw it out. We're not going to spend time on doing that. And that is a big win, right? Because there's a lot of time that you don't spend that you otherwise should have spent. And then the next question is, can we actually do this? Do we know how to do this? Or is it close to what we already can do? And sometimes it's not. And then we say, okay, we don't know how to do this. And we have to be honest about that too, right? And then the next question is it small enough? Because if it's too big, it eats too much time out of my team. And that means we cannot do other stuff at the same time. And we have a limited set of people, right, to do this stuff. So if this isn't small enough, it's too big, then we just send it back to the person who pitched it and say, please come back with a sort of like an MVP-like thing from this. What's the first thing that you could actually get from this that actually adds value? And then the next question is this the most important thing that we can spend our time on? If it's not, we'll just put it in something that we call the someday maybe column. And this is the scary thing. This comes from getting things done, right? It means you need to revisit the someday maybe column every 3 months. And people think we actually do that. But it's more like the recycle bin, right? Don't tell that I told it. So and then there's the 20% that we spend on small features. There's a similar group of people that can decide on this. They're usually the number twos of every department. It's on a Jira board. I'm not a big fan of Jira, but yeah, we have it anyway. I don't even understand Jira, right? I don't even know how to add an item to this board because I add one and then it disappears. I'm not a Jira expert, right? There's other people to do that. And then the third thing is we do need to keep the lights on, right? So we have this Slack channel where people just ask questions continuously. And then actually my team gets to choose whether they answer them or not. It's up to them, right? It's their responsibility to either do it or not. And all sorts of fun goes on there, right? Here's like somebody saying from content says, yeah, the button on the right there, it looks a little lost and lonely to me. And somebody else says, you know what? I'll add a friend button. It's, e-commerce jokes, well, yeah. So that's the second thing, right? We need to kill complexity, right? How do you kill complexity? Well, you take it, it's like how you bury an elephant. You take a spoon and then you start digging, right? And it's a step-by-step process. And you need to take really tiny steps to get out of there. Because we cannot just shut down the whole website and say, you know what, we'll be back in half a year. In half a year, everybody would have forgotten us, and then we would be bankrupt, right? We don't want to do that. So we needed to figure out how to renovate and how to innovate while keeping the shop open. That is not an easy thing to do, I can tell you. So that means you need to start taking really, really small steps. And if you think that you're taking small steps, forget it. You can take them even smaller. They can always be smaller, right? I check code in checked my code in today probably 6, 7 times. Sometimes the pipeline breaks, sometimes it doesn't. But that's how tiny steps you can take, right? Check in as many times as you can. And that's the thing, because, you have to start over with something simple. Now, there's this interesting model that helped me get out of this stuff. And this model, I explained it to the management team. Have you seen this model? It's called ConFoo. ConFoo is a really good model to explain why some things are harder than other things. I'll explain a little bit. So in the clear context, if you are there, the problem you have, there is a best practice to it. You just apply the best practice and you're good, right? If there's dishes on the sink, I'll put them in the dishwasher. My kids can't do that because they don't know where the dishwasher is, right? It's what kids do. If you're in the complicated zone, that means there's a bunch of good solutions. We know the good solutions, right? So if you do identity access management, there's like 10, 15 providers for that. You choose the one that fits you best and you implement it, done. This can still be done linearly, or you can do it in Scrum or whatever bad method. No, just kidding. But if you're on the left side of this diagram, like most of us will be, you're in an environment where the problems you're trying to solve had not yet been solved before in the context that you are in. So in your company, in your team, in your organization, in your country even, or maybe nobody's solved it before, right? And then you are in trouble. Because if you are in this situation, that means that you need to have different strategies for solving the problems. You cannot just say, this is a linear project and we're going to solve it. You need to get out of there. You need to, as Dave Snowden, the author of the model, says, in a chaotic context, search for the right answers is pointless. Because there aren't any yet. Right? You need to figure that out. They will emerge from what you're doing, which means that the chaotic domain, but it also goes for the complex domain, are very good places to impel innovation. And innovation is not easy. If you work for large companies, they think they do innovation, but the problem often is that they don't like you failing, right? And innovation and experimentation means that you can also fail. And if you're not allowed to fail, you can't innovate, because then you can't take any risks. And if you can't take any risks, you can't solve the problems that you don't know how to solve. That is troublesome, right? So you need to do experiments. And an experiment is basically a test done in order to learn something or to discover if something works or is true. But it could also be false, and you have to allow yourself to do that. And if you can't do that, you're in the wrong place. And there's only one thing you can do: quit. Or let the AI solve it, of course. I know. And by the way, if you don't make any decisions, you're also on the wrong path, because time passes by and other companies will come by with newer technology and better business cases, and they will outpass you. It happened to a bunch of companies I worked for in the past. So that means we all need to become this. If you are in the complex and the chaotic zones, I found this word on the internet. I have no idea if it's an actual word in English, but it's a koriwambo. This is basically what I do in life. I travel purposefully toward an as yet unknown destination. And that is basically, if you think about what we do as developers, as code writers, this is what we do, right? We try to solve things that have not yet been solved before. And in order to do that, you can only do one thing, is take small step. The next slide is an illustration of that. This is probably one of the most important slides in the deck. Unfortunately, I didn't make it up myself, but this is why you need to take small steps and why big steps don't work in this industry. Okay, let that sink in for a bit. Okay, next step. Who owns the work? Well, we do, right? So, of course. But the problem with software development is it's extremely complex. We are mostly on the left side in the ConFoo framework. And if you are on the left side of the ConFoo framework, that means you're dealing with problems that are extremely hard. Dijkstra already knew this, and he said this in 1984 or 1986, I can't remember. He said, the programmer has to be able to think in terms of conceptual hierarchies that are much deeper than a single mind ever faced before. We are in the most complex industry out there, right? That is exactly why the AI companies chose us to be replaced. I just made that up. Just kidding. And if you're in a situation like this, and this is one of my previous clients, They had this tech stack. When I got into this company, I asked them, so could you make a list on Confluence about all the technologies we use? And they said, yeah, sure, let's do that. You know how many developers they had? 30. You know what happened to the company? They went bankrupt. That's not good. So what I did with my team is we're moving to a single stack. In our case, we chose TypeScript. Doesn't have to be TypeScript, but you can do TypeScript anywhere, right? You can do it on the client, you can do it on server, you can do it on your mobile apps. So we chose TypeScript, so everybody's on the same stack. We have a small team, so we cannot afford to have multiple stacks. We just can't deal with that. And then I realized, looking into this, that in this industry, even though I've been in this industry for 40 years, there's so much that I don't know about it. There's also so much that I don't want to know, by the way, but I don't know everything anymore. I used to, when I started writing code on Turbo Pascal and the Turbo Pascal compiler on a black screen with green characters, that was it. There wasn't even a database. There was no internet, right? I learned to write code from a book. Okay, book. That's a bunch of pages put together. Just kidding. So the thing is, software development is a team sport. I said it before, and I'll say it again. This is the thing, right? The smallest unit of software ownership isn't the individual, it is the team. And if it's the team, you need to do things differently, right? So that means that owning the work starts by letting the people pick themselves and figure out what to do. And that means they need to have autonomy. And if they have autonomy, they can do things much better. The problem only with autonomy is that it's outside of most people's comfort zone. And because it's outside of most people's comfort zone, it's very hard to teach them how to be autonomous. I can only say, like, if you have to draw an owl, they'll start with 2 circles. That's a good idea. After that, I have no idea what to do, right? And then I learned this. This is D. Hock. He used to be the CEO of Visa. And he said this. And this is one of the other most important slides in the deck. He says, simple, clear purpose and principles give rise to complex and intelligent behavior. And that is what you need to solve complex problems, right? Otherwise, complex rules and regulations give rise to simple and stupid behavior. We've all seen this, right, in companies that are so tight on all the rules and regulations that they have that there's nobody moving forward anymore. That's the thing what happens. So he says this, you need to simplify to amplify. I think that is the core motto to what we need to do. We need to simplify stuff. We can't have the complexity that we have in this industry. And that means you need to have fewer rules. Now, this is a crossroads near where I live, and what the city council decided at one point in time is to remove the traffic lights. You know what happened when they removed the traffic lights? Everybody's like, oh, there's going to be all sorts of accidents. There weren't. You know what? Because people started looking at the other people in traffic, and they just made eye contact. And from that eye contact, they figured out what the intentions of the other people were. They also wanted to cross the road, but you can say, well, I'm going to take precedence, or you can have priority, and except when there's a tram, they get priority, right? Or when people drive a BMW, you also let them drive, because it's stuff like that. So the additional quote to that, it's in French actually, because it's from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I'll try to read it in French, right? La perfection est atteinte non pas lorsqu'il n'y a rien plus à ajouter, mais lorsqu'il n'y a plus rien à retrancher. For the non-French speakers, that means perfection is reached not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away, right? That is the core point. So we try to solve small problems every day, and we get good at that. The next slide might be a little bit shocking to you if you're in software development. I'm going to show you what we don't do. This is it, what we don't do, right? We don't do Scrum. I haven't done Scrum in like 15 years. I don't like Scrum particularly, but I'll talk to you about some beers, and that's a good point. That doesn't mean we do Kanban, right? It's not either or. There's different shades, and you need to figure out for yourself. We don't have sprints. We don't do retros because we don't have sprints. Because we don't do Scrum, we don't have a Scrum Master. We also don't have a product owner. The people on the team are their own product owner. They go out into the business and talk to people. That's relevant. That's important, right? And we don't have stories. Everybody's an architect. Why not, right? We have some guardrails, but not too many. We don't branch. We don't do pull requests. We do trunk-based development. And it saves a lot of time. So number 4. I'll go quickly on this, right? So what do we do? Well, we share knowledge all the time, continuously, right? We have like stand-up meetings every day. They're usually in hybrid mode. Usually the half of us is in the office, half of us is not. But we also do stuff like event storming. We do event storming sessions whenever we need to decide on how business processes really like, and we do that together with the business. The tall guy is our COO, for instance. And we do pair program. Not that it's mandatory, but people just like it. And if you don't like it, you don't, right? That's up to you. We do it in mob as well. We do a lot of mob programming on the team. That's also really nice to do, right? And we coach people. Fulia is just new on the team. She's been with us for a month and a half, and that means we coach her to get better at what she does and to help her to integrate into the team. We have lean coffee sessions. Every Tuesday, we sit together, people come up with topics, we vote for it, and people present it. That's a nice thing to have. And all these techniques help us to get better at what we do as a team. And we work very much as a team. Yes, we also do vibe coding, most of the time, actually. That doesn't mean that AI is a silver bullet yet. I'm not sure it's going to become a silver bullet, but you have to realize this when it comes to AI, right? Yes, we have faster cars. Yes, we have better tools. We have better tools than we've ever had. But that the same was 5 years ago. We also had better tools than we ever had. And 10 years ago, that was also the case. So we still have tools. And yes, the tools get better. That means we can solve bigger problems, problems that we couldn't solve before. But it doesn't mean we will go faster, because you still get stuck in traffic, right? If you try to drive your car through Amsterdam, you might as well hop on a bicycle, because you're faster on a bicycle, actually. And it's basically like this. This is Francisco. And Francisco says, coding is just a way of expressing my thinking. He's the most outward of our team when it comes to using AI. And then we have microteams. This is a pattern that we sort of saw happening. We don't do this on purpose. Again, we're solving one problem every day. And we realize that from all these different boards, there's a lot of different items coming off it. And none of these items actually require the same skills. That means that everybody on my team can pick any item and start working on it. And usually somebody else says, you know what, I want to know something about this tool. I'll join you. I'll come with you and I'll help you finish this stuff. They discuss it, they talk to the business, they work on it, and they check their code in, done. And they go off and split up and do it next team. Show you some examples. This is a Java developer talking to an infra guy. Nothing wrong with it. Here's 3 developers. They're looking very, very disturbed, actually. Here's 2 developers and a tester. You may guess who the tester is. Yes, he has to stand. 2 Java developers, they have beards. Oh yeah, this one also, this is a developer and an architect. The developer already knows it's not going to work, and the architect is still praying for it, right? So it's good stuff. So yeah, this is a nice technique. And we didn't just say, no, you need to work in microteams. It just happens. And it's a pattern that I see all along when working in teams. And it's a really nice thing to do, actually. And then the ING, I got a lot of discussions on LinkedIn. I discussed things on LinkedIn. I like that. And then they said, well, this doesn't scale. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care. I don't have to scale. That's not my problem. And then the ING said, well, it does scale. We actually have 1,500 people working like this now. I'm like, okay. They just call it micro squads. Don't know why, but... Anyway, so we need to deliver value continuously. If you go into shorter cycles, and you need to, because shorter cycles give you faster feedback, that's the other thing that can be shorter and smaller, right? So we started in this industry with waterfall, and then we moved to RUP in the 90s, and DSDM in the mid-90s, and then we went into Scrum and XP, and the cycles got shorter and shorter. By now, we have cycles that run multiple times per day, right? My team checks in the code or puts it to production 50 to 80 times per day. And that is just a good thing, because the feedback cycles get shorter. That also means that we stopped using sprints. Sprints are a mechanism that can fail a lot. Have you ever seen a sprint succeed, that you exactly did what you promised at the start of a sprint? It doesn't happen, right? It's very rare that it happens, because speed and progress is very different. It's not very linear. And that is because teams are different. I was in South Africa 2 years ago, and I photographed all these animals. And this is a herd of kudos. It's a team, right? They have to work as a team, because otherwise they get eaten. These are rhinos, right? They don't care. They're just out there. Nobody kills them, except for humans, of course. But and then you go into Cape Town, and you see this, right? It's like different pattern all the time. But different teams have different behaviors. And that means that if you want to be agile, if you want to be truly agile, it's not about following some stupid framework. It's about figuring out for yourself how you work best and continuously evolve all that stuff. And it means you literally can stop doing sprints. This is here in Montreal, and that means that you can make your cycles shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, and get to the point that you deliver value continuously all the time with every check-in that you do. And Jess Humble, the author of the book, then says, well, if it hurts, do it more frequently and bring the pain forward. This is still about software development, right? So not to mistake. So if you have like big changes and you do them every quarter, there's a lot of changes in the stuff you have. If you only release every quarter, it'll slow you down. You go from 3 months to 4 months to 6 months to year cycles, and then you go bankrupt, right? So you should turn it around. This is one of the other most important slides in the deck. If the next train comes along in 2.5 minutes from the current one, do you need to rush? No, you don't, right? It doesn't matter, because you can take the next one. And that is what Jason Gorman says. He says, missing the bus is not a big deal if you know there'll be another one along in 5 minutes, right? If there's no bus anymore, you have to wait till morning, then you better make sure that everything's there, right? And that is exactly what goes wrong in software development. So if you break everything down into really tiny pieces and release them all the time, the chances that something breaks are much smaller, actually, instead of bigger. So the smaller stuff is, the less easy it is to break. In order to get there, you need to automate everything, right? Everything in the kitchen sink. That means your infrastructure becomes code. By the way, I found an actual Docker container in... this is in Morocco, actually, so it's pretty nice. So that means you need to invest in full CI/CD. You need to completely automate all of this stuff and get better at it all the time, right? In our case, our pipelines run for about 30 minutes, and then it's in production. That also means that you need to stop inspecting in the end. You cannot have inspections late. Code reviews, pull requests, they all make you late. So if you can figure out ways to not do that, and they exist, you can go in the reverse direction, right? That means you need to automate it. Your tests need to be automated. They need to be everywhere and all the time, even in production. We test everywhere. And but that means every piece of code that we write, that we check in, goes through all of these tests. That means that I'm pretty sure that it will work. And that means that I can actually code with confidence. I actually took this picture from one of my previous team. You know why he's praying for it to work, right? He works in light mode. So you just don't do that. So we stopped doing pull requests, and we stopped doing code reviews, because they slow you down. And if you work together like I just showed you, you actually don't have to do that. That means you look at the code together, you check it in. Instead of somebody writes the code, checks it in, and somebody else 2 weeks later in some other building looks at it and has no idea what he's looking at, so he just checks the formatting. That's what Prettier does in my case, right? You don't have to do that. So we move to trunk-based development. 7th part. And the last part. So, having fun. Yes, that does mean you go out with your team and figure out that you can drink beers, or some of our people don't drink beer, but that's also nice. But actually, having fun, for me, is well described by Dan Pink in the book Drive. He has this diagram in there. He says, well, if you have purpose, and I'll show you about purpose, and mastery, that means sharing the knowledge in your team, and you give the people autonomy, they will actually get drive. And whether you like this model or not, it actually works for us. So we got the people that have drive. And I don't have to motivate my team to do stuff. They are motivated. They have this intrinsic motivation, which is cool. One more thing. This is my mom on the left, by the way. Yeah, we do resemble each other. And I was showing her the pictures from a holiday, and then she said, why didn't we ever go to Italy? We were in Italy, and so my dad and my mom, they went to the same campsite in the south of France for about 25 years. And that's okay, right? There's lots of people who do this and who take pleasure in doing the same thing all the time. However, you also need people that like the change, because old keys won't open new doors, right? If you want to have change and you're a person of change, that's probably why you are here. Because the other people who go to the same campsite in France for 25 years, they're usually not the people that show up at conferences. That means if you like change, you need to ignite it. And there's only one person to do that, right? You cannot wait until your manager does. By the way, I actually tried this at the local football club. It works, if you're the first, right? So that means if you want to change stuff, there's only one person to do this, and that's you, right? You're the only one who can do this. So 30 seconds intro. Change is everywhere. Change is faster than it ever was before in this industry. And that means we need to simplify to amplify. More procedures, more protocols will not help us through this era. Right? We need to simplify. That means that if you want to be agile, that means you need to figure out for yourself how it works. Don't believe the Scrum Master that says, no, you cannot do this in Scrum or you cannot do that in Scrum. It doesn't matter what they say. Well, sometimes, but not if they want to block you in innovating, right? Or in changing stuff. You need to be able to do that. So go off and solve really simple problems every day. Make every problem as simple as you can. Deliver value continuously and never, ever, ever stop learning, because that is what we do in this industry. We have to do this. And I was talking to Kayla, who's the barista here in the back, and she said this to me yesterday. That's really cool, actually. She said, it's not about how much you know, it's about how quickly you can adapt, right? Take that from our barista. She's not here anymore, she left at 2, but that was a pretty cool quote. By the way, if everything else fails, if nothing in this stuff that I showed you works, there's only one thing you can do, and that is you remove your node modules and do your npm install. Okay, one more thing, and then I'm going to go. Take your mom out to dinner more often, please. Thank you for having me.